Attention CEOs, fire yourself. Hi, my name is Nick Mehta, CEO of Gainsight, and I'll never stop learning about Taylor Swift. When you're a leader that's managing leaders, you owe it to the people further down the ranks to give them great leaders. I'm sure there will have an AI CEO very soon who will be better than me. I always tell people at Gainsight, I'm like, it's a shocker, but you won't be here forever. That's just how things are. People leave companies. And that's why I'm a huge believer treating people really well on the way out.
Heard you being referred to as the godfather of customer success.
Oh, but that's better than the grandfather of customer success. I don't know how you as a CEO or a leader can make good decisions without talking to customers. Tell us what we're not good at. It's a gift to get constructive feedback. I think a big part of being a B2B business now is you're not just selling software or some other product. You're actually trying to help people stay on the cutting edge. Because business doesn't have to be pure business. It can be human too. Customers are human beings first, right? So whether it's being a Swiftie or a Bruce Springsteen fan or being part of the learning community, you want to be part of something. The future of learning is about community.
So let's talk a bit about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Taylor Swift, and the Steelers. I'm wondering, as a CEO...
Oh my gosh. So you did your research, huh?
Hi, and welcome to Leaders in Learning. I'm your host, Shauna David. Today, I'm sitting down with the godfather of customer success, Nick Mehta. Nick has been instrumental in making customer success what it is today. As the CEO of Gainsight, he has led the company through rapid growth and multiple successful acquisitions to become a leader in the industry. So what can we learn about the power of culture, empathy, and community in business? From a self-proclaimed nerd, diehard Steelers fan, and apparently a bigger Swiftie than my daughters. Keep watching to find out. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today on Leaders in Learning here in San Francisco, your hometown.
Yeah, I live just near here. Thank you. Thanks for having me here. It's exciting.
So our first question is about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Taylor Swift, and the Steelers. I'm wondering, as a CEO, how do you balance the wisdom of RBG, the creativity of Taylor Swift, and the resilience of the Steelers?
Oh my gosh.
And is there one of those three that you lean into the most when stuff is tough and you have to make a tough call?
So you did your research, huh? So yeah, I think all of us can find inspiration where you combine different parts of your life together. So for me, if I use your direct question, so what did I learn from all three? Well, RBG obviously, and there are a lot of other people like this too, just can have incredible integrity and a point of view on what they believe in.
Yeah.
Whether people believe in what she believed in or not, the idea is you can believe in something and just stick to it. And then you look at Taylor Swift, or probably, the one I, spend the most time recently thinking about. She is the things that are amazing is she has such an affection for her community. And she does an amazing job building this incredible community of Swifties. She's incredibly creative in her songwriting, and I love writing. But she's also somebody that just brings her heart and soul to everything she does. And then I am a crazy NFL fan, Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I haven't missed a game for 27 years or something. And so I think what's interesting there is you learn the value of loyalty and consistency. So in the case of the Steelers, they've actually had 3 coaches in 45 years or 50 years. And that's very rare, right? And there's some benefit to the persistence, durability, tenure. I've been really grateful to be CEO of Gainsight for about 12 years. And it doesn't mean don't need to change. In fact, I have to change every year. But there's some value consistency too.
Did you always know you wanted to be a CEO when you grew up?
I actually recently, somebody was asking me about the same question about what did you want to be when you grew up and did you want to be CEO? So I pulled out my application letter, somehow if I have it on my Dropbox or whatever, pulled out my application letter to college written in 1993 or whatever.
Okay.
And it said, what do you want to be in 20 years? And it was I'm going to be a CEO running a tech company or whatever. Literally, that's what it said. So I guess that's actually what I wanted. I have many different turns along the way, but apparently I'm doing what I wanted.
Somewhere deep inside, you knew that was going to be a calling. But I want to hear a bit more about this reskilling. We talked a little bit about it in your individual life, but if you zoom out, according to the World Economic Forum, there are going to be 97 million new jobs in the next couple of years, and 50% of workers will need to be reskilled in order to fill those jobs. So with that crazy stat, what do you think is the opportunity for companies?
If you look at learning and the changes in jobs, I think it's going into turbo mode, right? Because of generative AI and all the other advancements in technology. And so we are in a world where tons of jobs are going to get destroyed, but all these other ones will get created. And it's not, I have a lot of empathy for the people that are going to be in that world where their jobs are no longer as relevant.
Yeah.
But if we do the right things as society and companies, we can help them get to the other side. In fact, I think some people are not talking about this enough. Like, it is just going to happen. But what we can do about it is help people get to the jobs that are going to be needed. Right now, some of those are already known, right? So for example, there's perpetually a shortage of nurses, home care workers, plumbers, electricians, carpenters. That may not be for everyone, right? But those are jobs that are needed for sure. And there's actually, if you ever try to get a plumber or a nurse or whatever, there's a long line, right? Long physical therapist. And so some of it's like, where's the demand, and helping people go to where the demand is. And then also helping train people for the jobs that don't even exist right now. Right. So a simple example that you probably know about is like in generative AI, big thing is prompt engineering. Yeah. So how do I write really good prompts? Kind of like for folks who are watching, use ChatGPT, and it's like, what do I type in to get the best answer? And there's a lot of learning around that. People are just learning as we go. And so that's an example of something that actually is accessible to pretty much everyone, particularly people who like writing, and it doesn't require deep coding skills. And ironically, as you know, like software engineering is still going to be a thing, but a lot of the routine software engineering is actually going to be automated. And so even for engineers, even the people that built generative AI, some of those jobs are going to have to transition to something else. So all of us are in this boat. I'm sure there will have an AI CEO very soon who will be better than me.
So I want to understand from your perspective, this is a question a bit about nature versus nurture. So I'm wondering how your nature of being a self-proclaimed geek and a bit of a weird wallflower, also me too,
Yeah.
and you're nurturing, your influence from your parents, your education, your life experiences. How did all of that come together to shape your worldview? And also, more recently, this transformational journey to Nick 2.0.
You know everything.
Or
Wow.
is this Nick 2.0?
I think it's Nick 2. I don't know if we've gotten to 2.1 yet or not, but somebody asked me about 3.0. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's scary.
Almost as fast as an OS update.
Yeah, exactly.
So has your nature and your nurture shaped who you are? How has it shaped?
I don't know how much is nature and nurture, but I think the biggest thing that I've been able to do is understand who I've been and truly understand who I am. Like my childhood, I was very lonely as a kid. I didn't have any friends. I still have some of that insecurity. My parents wanted me to be super ambitious. I still have this feeling of not being enough. I like the creative side, and so I have these things that are who I am. And I've done a lot of work in terms of coaching, development, feedback to understand that and to say okay, this is who I am. Now, it doesn't mean I can't learn, right? I can learn and I always want to be learning, but I also can learn understanding from the vantage point of what makes me me. Now, is that nurture? Is that nature? I have no idea. But do I know that I can develop skills on top of this foundation? Absolutely. This is where I believe in growth mindset. Maybe some of the essence of who we are is formed from childhood Gen X. I don't know, probably. But that doesn't mean people can't be more or different than what they are now. That's why when somebody says, for example, oh, I can't do that, I'm not technical. I'm like, it's not magic.
It's not binary.
It's not like being, a 7-foot tall basketball player. That's probably hard for me to do practically. I don't think I can grow to 7 feet. But you know what? I think most of us have the ability to do more and learn more than we give ourselves credit for.
That's so well said. And I mean, it's not about, it's like that as a kid, I think we're all born creative. And then there comes a point in time where people get this impression that they're not creative.
Yeah.
And you kind of hear adults saying, well, I'm just not creative.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Versus what I think you're saying is nature, nurture, be it as it may, there's a layer on top of that of, may I call it self-awareness? Yeah. You tap into, you can really learn to be whatever you want to be. And it's not where you start, it's where you choose to go.
100%. Except for a 7-foot tall basketball player. You can be anything you want to be. Maybe you could be a 7-foot.
Well, I wanted to be a middle hitter in volleyball, but I am vertically challenged. So that didn't work out. Well, and I want to understand, we've talked about Taylor, we've talked about RBG, we've talked about the Steelers, but we have not talked about the boss. And I understand Born to Run, Thunder Road, Bruce Springsteen. I'm a big fan of Born in the USA. And there is a quote prominently featured on your LinkedIn that has like about 100,000 followers. So like no small group of humans. And the quote is broken hero on a last chance power drive.
Yeah.
But I have faith that there's magic in the night.
Yeah.
What do those quotes mean to you? What do those lyrics mean to you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, yeah, I do love Bruce Springsteen so much, and I think there's a parallel to Taylor and Bruce, which is they put their heart into their lyrics, and they're just amazing lyricists, but it's, like, truly personal. And if you look at Bruce Springsteen, you look at Thunder Road, which is, song you're referring to, and, like, I think that there is this passion that he has, this, like, verve for life, but it's very honest. It's like broken hero on a last chance power drive, broken, like, we are all broken in some way. Last chance power drive, like, we're all striving even though maybe we won't get there, right? And then having faith there's magic in the night is idea that, look, are things that can happen and your dreams can happen sometimes and you can have hope, right? And so I think Bruce brings to the world an incredible sense of hope that's grounded in reality.
But let's talk about the real bosses in your life. I have 3 kids, you have 4. I suspect they may somewhat be the boss of the Meta household in some capacity.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm definitely like the bottom of the rung, including the 2 dogs who are also the dogs might be the bosses because they really just assert their dominance, and we just take care of them all the time. So I think they're the smart ones. But yeah, my kids, I mean, I actually was talking to somebody earlier today, and he said, I asked for I was interviewing him, and it was lifelong lessons. What did you learn? And he's like, well, I learned the most from my kids, and I think that's so powerful. And I don't think it's just applies to kids. It's this philosophy that, yeah, you can be experienced. You can have done a lot of things. You can be, middle-aged like me, but you can also still learn from other people that are younger than you, that are earlier than you, have less experience. At Gainsight, we talk about this concept, this Japanese word Shoshin, which means beginner's mind. And you guys might be familiar with it given your focus on learning. And beginner's mind's idea that, you can always learn. There's always more to learn and approach life like you're still a beginner. And so with my kids, learning, how does the next generation think about society and values and the economy? It's just really interesting. It's easy to be like, oh, kids these days, or you can be like, oh, wow, these kids have some amazing things to learn.
Well, and how has fatherhood informed your view as a CEO?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, let's see. Let me think about what are some examples. Like, I think one of them is this whole idea of learning from people that maybe have less experience than you or just earlier in their career. That's been so powerful. I mean, of course, I could drop the Gen Z lingo with my employees too. And by the way, some of them don't even know what brat summer is. And I'm like, come on, you don't know brat summer?
Come on.
How do you even function? But
This is where you put lime green on the backdrop of this conversation.
I literally have a brat lime green t-shirt. We're making a video. So another video to come. And I've learned so much from my kids and then from earlier career employees.
Yeah.
And I get to hear feedback from them one-on-one, et cetera. And that's like one thing to me is just like being open to input, whether it's somebody just joined Gainsight or they just started their career. That's like something that I think is super powerful. The other thing tying to what we talked about with our kids is, being proud of your teammates, even when they're not there anymore in the company, right? So we've had, been around 12 years. So we have lots of people come to Gainsight and then some move on, right? And so there's tons of alumni of Gainsight. And we always tell them, you'll always be a gainster is kind of what the term we use. You'll always be a gainster, but watching them get their first chief revenue officer job or their first VP job or start a company, and you're like so proud. And yeah, they're not in your company anymore and you miss them, but it's the bigger feeling is pride and gratitude that you were a small part of their story.
Oh, and it's like they become OGs, like
OG.
oh,
You got it.
right?
Original gangsters.
yeah,
Yeah.
original gainsters. We had a guest a couple months ago talk about how this like obsession over retention could actually be hurting companies.
100%. I totally agree.
I love this perspective that you have.
Totally agree. You're not trying to just hold on to people. It's a little bit like going back to the parenting analogy. Yeah, you don't want to smother your kids and say, oh, how come you don't call me enough, et cetera. It's like, yeah, I mean, that might happen with my mom. My mom might do that, but I've learned to, I love her. I love my mom, but I think there's a different approach.
Well, and I hear you. You want them to be successful, right? And you want their growth to happen regardless of where it's happening.
Exactly. And that's why I'm a huge believer treating people really well on the way out. and celebrating them. When somebody leaves, says they're going to leave, in fact, like last week, somebody said they're going to leave, and I always try to reach out to each person. And it's not like, oh my God, how do I convince you to stay, or guilting them? It's thank you for everything you've done. It's congratulations, tell me about what you're going to do next. And it's like, help us learn, what can we do even better in the future? That's it. There's no guilting. When they post their job on LinkedIn, the new thing, I like comment on it and say congrats. And some people are like, Nick, that's weird. Like if you comment, since you have a big following, other people will know that that person left. I'm like, yeah, but that's just how things are. People leave companies. I always tell people at Gainsight, I'm like, it's a shocker, but you won't be here forever.
Right, because companies aren't like a family. I kind of
They're not.
more to like a sports team.
That's where, Netflix, I think Reed Hastings originally had that in his culture deck. He had this thing that we're not a family or sports team. I think the like idea of saying companies are families is very, very inauthentic. Families don't fire people, I don't think. Maybe some families do. Yeah. And so it's
That's a different TV show.
yeah, exactly. Actually, that's true. There are some reality TV shows where that happens. But yeah, it's like a sports team. And what I love about sports teams, because you're a big sports fan too, is they have seasons, and everyone knows at the end of the season, some player might get traded. Like basketball, the trades happen all the time, right? Some player may retire, some player may get cut. And that is like how it works. But when you're in the season, you're all in it together. You're this like tight camaraderie. And then the season's over, and then you might go do your next thing. Right. And I think that's how
Right, and you may be reunited at some point in different context. So in your job as CEO of Gainsight, you've been doing it for 12 years. Sometimes people still aren't sure of like customer success, customer service.
Yep.
And I've heard you being referred to as the godfather of customer success.
Oh, that's better than the grandfather of customer success. I'll take
Well,
that.
I was gonna say no. I'm just so I want you to help like demystify, maybe describe the difference between customer success and customer service in like one or two words.
Yeah, totally. So it's basically proactive versus reactive. So in the customer support world, traditionally, it's like when you have a problem, call me, right? But in the customer success world, it's like, no, Docebo, Gainsight, we got to make sure people are using our stuff and getting value. So even if they're not calling me, I want to call them. That's the difference.
So how do you anticipate the rise? We talked a little bit about AI. I'm curious about the impact AI could potentially have on these traditionally human relationships.
Yeah.
Is there risk around AI eroding some of that personal touch, human first approach that especially a company like Gainsight's known for?
Yeah, I mean, there is for sure. There's risk in all the aspects of whether it's jobs or the human relationship, but I think there's opportunity too. It's like most things in life. And I think what's going to happen is today, the experience of working with vendors is actually not nothing great for customers either. You have sometimes you talk to a sales development rep, that person that's screening the leads, and then that's after going to a website, and then you talk to a sales development rep, then you talk to an account executive, and maybe there's a sales engineer, and then you buy, and then you go through onboarding, and there's an onboarding team, and then there's a CSM team, and there's another salesperson that works with you on your renewal. And your company, my company, all of us have the same thing,
Yeah.
right? And it's not a great experience. It's not superhuman in itself. Now, are all those humans hopefully great? For sure. Like that's our goal, right? But is the experience very human? No. And so I think there's a world where over time, we use AI to automate a lot of the things that are not very human. We call this human first AI because our company culture, mission, ethos is we call human first business. Think about everyone as a human being first, whether it's a customer, whether it's an employee, whether it's an employee that left, all that kind of stuff, right? And so in the world of human first, how do we apply it to AI? How do we have AI help make the experience for the team, like your team, more human, make the experience for the customers, your customers, more human? And what we can do is build over time virtual agents and other digital capabilities to automate a lot of the stuff that is not high value. You think about some examples like, you're taking notes, you're identifying contacts, you're figuring out, you're looking up information, you're identifying risk. Like AI can do all that today, right? And we built a whole bunch of stuff in that area. But AI does not yet build the human relationship. And I think a lot of clients value that. They want an advisor. But right now, honestly, people can't do that because they're so busy updating their CRM or Gainsight or whatever. So yeah, it needs to change.
So that balance between how are the humans spending their time, right? There's like assembly line of humans to make a customer life cycle happen. Sometimes that can feel like you're shipping the org versus doing what's best for the customer.
Exactly right.
And so what you're saying is AI can take away some of the toil and tax and actually enable those humans to more proactively reach out because X, Y, and Z happen, and they were notified through their data without the effortfulness that takes away from their time to actually be human with their customers.
You nailed it. And then, maybe if you take it to the next level, you can also help collapse that assembly line of roles. So today we have all these roles, and a lot of the reason they have all these roles is knowledge, learning. It's all trapped.
Yeah.
Right. So for example, you're a CSM and you know about your little part of the world, or you're a salesperson,
Yeah.
but what if generative AI allows us to share all that knowledge? What if I can actually reduce the number of roles and increase the customer experience and the employee experience? And what if I don't need to like have every person just have their tiny little piece, but actually have people that can span a lot more of that life cycle, and then use AI as that assistant to help them when customer asks a question, right? So for example, you're a CSM, customer success manager, and a customer asks you a question, but it's more of a support question. Now, what does a CSM typically do? They say, oh, great question. Let me route you to our support team. And that's kind of like when you call a 1-800 number and you get routed. Oh, we're transferring you here. You're transferring here. You're transferring here, right? Sometimes you get transferred back to the same place. And there's no reason that has to happen. What if in a future world, the CSM is on that call with a customer asks a question, and the CSM uses the power of generative AI to give the answer? And if they need like a super expert, they bring in that expert. But what if they can actually do a lot themselves?
It'd be so powerful, right? I think about the impact of knowledge management, and it truly is a team sport. And if you manage the knowledge effectively in your org, you can find all of these opportunities. But we need an engine, and that's
Exactly right.
comes in.
You
Right?
nailed it.
So let's talk a bit about Taylor Swift and how, okay, so seriously, let's talk about her power as it relates to community and the movement. Anything business leaders can learn from how she's gone about cultivating crazy amounts of loyalty.
She's incredibly intentional, right? And so everything she does is well thought out, and so and it feels very authentic, but it's also very strategic. She has a PR person named PR person's best name ever, Tree Payne, famous if you're a Swiftie, and so Tree and her, like they have this incredible sense of what people want. So just to give you some examples of what that looks like, right? So when she's at a concert, the way that she works the audience with, you have bracelets that light up, and it's like she's talking to you. She's singing to you. I think the best artists are like, you're there with like 70,000 people, but it feels like she's singing to you. And it's a lot of the little things about just the gestures, the expressions, all those kinds of things. So how do you make it feel like, yeah, you're a CEO of a 1,000-person company, but you're like laser focused on this one person. So that's one thing, is the very like intentional, personal touch. Second thing is then finding those ways to make that touch in truly authentic ways where she's helping. There's famous stories of like her showing up at a wedding and performing randomly, or a kid asking for something and her helping that kid out, or all these stories. And
Truck drivers,
the truck drivers, she paid them all hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so she does this because she's truly, I think, a great person, but also it is incredible because then you hear those stories and it feels like, oh, wow, we're all together. And like, you can then see like the way she does album releases, and she drops all these like hints beforehand. And so everyone's studying those. That's another thing that happens in great communities, is because there's like the shared passion, everyone wants to almost show their own adeptness at the community and almost trump everyone else in terms of like kind of one up the people, right? So each person's one upping the next person. So you'll go on TikTok and you'll see all these Taylor Swift videos where people are analyzing every little hint about the next album. And so it creates this feeling of intrigue and mystery. And so again, when you're in business, I think, how do you launch things, do events that create this feeling of like, I want to learn more. I need to know more, right? You don't just, I'll reveal all at once. Obviously, great companies like Apple and others do an amazing job of this, right? So I think there's a whole bunch of things she does, but the commonality is, I think when you're a Swiftie, which I am, you feel like, doesn't matter if you're a middle-aged dude or you're like a more the demographic of the 13 to 16-year-old person, either way, you feel like you're part of something. And I think all community, like the biggest learning I've had, because we've built community in our business, it's basically human beings want to feel like they're part of something. It's that feeling of like fellowship and kinship. We want to be part of something, whether it's being a Swiftie or a Bruce Springsteen fan or being part of the learning community. You want to be part of something.
Yeah. And that hasn't changed regardless of the technology that we're wrapped in.
No.
That's just like deep rooted in who we are as humans.
Back to the probably Neanderthal days or something. I don't know.
I'd argue learning is another one of those things, like being around humans, community, or just
Learning and community, I think, are very much peanut butter and jelly or whatever analogy you want to use. You know what I mean? Like people go to community because they want to learn. And by learning, you're building community. And so it's very synergistic between the two of them.
like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
So you get to talk to customers a lot too, right? You get some of your wisdom, the things that you think about and how you problem solve at Gainsight. So one of the things we try to do with this series is give people some real practical like tools, playbooks that they can take and apply in their day-to-day. So what is the biggest insight that you've got from talking to your customers?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because I am super passionate about it. I think all of us do the things that we end up finding energy from or feeling like you're good at or whatever. So if you look at my calendar, I literally every week 10 to 15 customer meetings. Yeah, so a huge number. And when I do it, so there's a few insights I've had. One kind of meta insight, which is I don't know how you as a CEO or a leader can make good decisions without talking to customers.
100%.
So when you come into a strategy meeting and you work in strategy, you come to a strategy meeting, you're like, hey, I think we should do X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, what customers did you talk to inform that?
Yeah.
Right. And some people just pontificate and others have real world input. So I think understanding the value of customer input and sharing that with a company that like all of us need to do that. That's one learning. A second learning is really learning how to get honest input from customers. People will be like, frankly, like, especially with CEO, they'll be like just very like flattering or whatever. But you want to be like, look, what do we do wrong? You know, I had a customer today we did a fireside chat with our employees.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, his name's Ray. I was like, Ray, tell us like what Gainsight's bad at. What are the things that we're not, because he's used Gainsight before. Tell us what we're not good at. And I want to learn that. And I always tell people, it's a gift to get feedback, right? And it's a gift to get constructive feedback. And some people feel like, oh, I don't want to say that. I don't want to offend Nick. I'm like, no. Feedback that's even really tough is an incredible, incredible gift. The final one I've learned is remembering, ties to our company ethos, that customers are human beings first, right? So you meet a customer and yeah, okay, they're at some company and they have a VP or whatever, but they are somebody who has childhood dreams. They've got, expectations from their family or friends. They've got people in their lives to support, whether it's kids or a spouse or aging parents or friends or whatever. They can get frustrated at work. They may love their job. They may hate their job. They may want to get promoted. They may want to get a new job.
All in one day.
All in one day, yeah. And so I have been privileged to get to know thousands of customers on a human level, such that they call me when they're thinking about switching jobs, such that they call me when they're frustrated with their boss, and that's an amazing gift because like business doesn't have to be pure business. It can be human too.
Well, and it is a human. Commerce is almost as old as civilization.
That's right. Exactly.
So we've been doing this for a hot minute, way before the
100%. Totally right.
So what about this dawn of AI? 40% of large businesses plan to invest in AI. Is it a good idea? A bad idea? How do we make sure we don't lose the human first approach?
Yeah. I mean, it's like a lot of things in business where people can debate whether it's good or not bad for the world.
It's happening.
It's inevitable. Like, it's just not like there's nothing it's just happening. And you can be like, hey, this company shouldn't do it or whatever. Somebody else will do it. There's no value in debating whether it's happening or whether it should happen. The value, I think, as you were alluding to, is how do we like make it a force for good, both in business, but also in society. Now, I'm no expert on the society part, but on the business part, I think what we can do is, number one, really identify what are the things that can be more human and what are the things that don't really leverage humans' gifts, like I was saying before, that we can automate, right? So that's a big part of it. What are the new things we could do that we never did before because it wasn't possible and now it is. Now it's possible to deliver, for example, a experience that's like in your product and constantly helping you do the next thing you should be doing from a work perspective.
Let's talk about some top 10 mistakes you made. I've heard a talk that you did recently about the top 10 mistakes. Which one of these lessons, and there's like 10 lessons that you presented at that talk about things you do differently. So what advice do you think is relevant for leaders today in this era of rapid change? And what can CEOs, new or old CEOs, learn from your experiences, your mistakes?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm always one of the biggest learnings I share with people is be careful about learning from other people. So it's kind of a bit of a meta learning.
So
So
spoiler, I mean,
yeah,
warning, I should say, disclaimer before taking your advice. I'm just joking.
yeah, don't take my advice. Exactly. And the reason I say that is I think that there is some element of like, you can't just copy somebody else's style, right? Like, what's the thing that works for you? You can't be like, oh, I should be a Taylor Swift fan and a Bruce Springsteen fan and into philosophy or whatever. No, like, what's the thing that you're into? And I personally believe that's a superpower when you go back and understand your childhood and what you're into and what you love outside of work. And then you combine all that into this kind of polymath view of how you lead. I see a lot of leaders who they like, for example, build their company culture and they do it based on reading some blog posts. And they're like, oh yeah, this value, they have this and they have, and then it's so generic. It's like, oh my gosh, like you don't actually care about this. And then the employees can tell. One of the greatest compliments I get from our employees when they like ask a lot of people, hey, what's unique about Gainsight? They're like, it's the first company I ever worked for where it feels like you actually care about the values.
That's an
Right. It's
incredible thing.
incredible and sad, obviously, that they didn't have this experience before, but very, very grateful. And so I think part of it is just really understanding yourself and not trying to be something that you see other people. And I've tried to even do this myself. I remember, I take an example. There's a guy named Ben Horowitz. He's like a famous CEO, VC. He was a founder of Andreessen Horowitz or co-founder, and which is a big VC firm. And he wrote this book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it's a great book. It's a really good book about being a leader, being a CEO. And so I read the book and talks about his company went through some hard times and then he had to save it. And one of the meetings he had with his team, he was just super honest and kind of harsh about the reality. So anyways, he said that and he gave the speech and it rallied the troops. So I tried that. I was like, oh, this is years ago. We had like, I don't know, a few bad quarters or something. So I got the team together and I was like, hey, things aren't really going well here at Gainsight, blah, blah, blah. And it was just demoralizing. So for Ben Horowitz, it worked. For Nick Mehta, it didn't work. And so I think trying to just be like, okay, what is going to work for me? Who am I? What's the style I have? Maybe I'm an introvert. Maybe I'm a musician. Maybe whatever it is. What's the way you can channel that into who you authentically are? I think that's like one lesson. Another one that I've learned, which is maybe related to this, is that, when you're running a company or you're running a team, that the people that work for you depend on you. They really do for everything from satisfaction of their job, a feeling of winning, the actual paycheck, right? They all depend on you. And when you're a leader that's managing leaders, you owe it to the people further down the ranks to give them great leaders. So we actually just launched kind of like the next iteration of our culture called Gainsight 2.0. And there was like a Nick 2.0. It was all like, what's the next phrase? And I told the employees, I was like, hey, look, this isn't just about you doing more, working harder. It's actually about me giving you the leaders that you need for this next phase. And that's not an indictment of the leaders that we've had, but I made a bunch of changes because I was like, we need the leaders for the next phase. I think one of the mistakes I made against that, one of 1,000 mistakes, is not making those decisions earlier. Most CEOs will say this, by the way, they wish they'd made those changes earlier. But what really helped me make those changes is say, it's not about that one person that works for me. It's about in my case, 1,000 people in the company. If I'm keeping this one person on because I'm not brave enough to get the right person in here, I'm doing a bad job. In fact, I'm being unethical because all these other people depend on me. It's just comfortable to not move on from that person. You feel bad about giving that input, right? But you know what? That's how the job should go.
It sounds like one of the things that's enabled you to be successful over 12 years is this constant evolution, understanding what is needed from you to meet the moment.
That's exactly
And
what
that changes.
I wrote. This LinkedIn post years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It's probably the most shared thing I've ever written. And it said, attention CEOs, fire yourself. And the idea was basically like every year, every quarter, however often you want to do it, whether you're a CEO or you're a leader or you're even an individual contributor, what's the new job description for the role?
Yeah.
And how can I make sure I am that CEO? I can be that person that's different than what we needed 3, 4 years ago. And I was joke that I like hope I get the job again. Right? I do. I like
But
my job.
it is good for you to have that tripwire. And I think about the values, the refresh values, they don't work unless they're connected. From an organizational perspective, this is where you see a lot of it fall down from a performance. The culture is that your values aren't connected to your behaviors, aren't connected to the way that you hire, fire, reward, stuff.
That's right. Exactly.
And it sounds like you're unveiling Gainsight 2.0 because you needed new values, new behaviors to help in this next chapter.
Right. And not lose, exactly right. And not losing, what we've been and who we are, but saying we need to evolve and growth mindset. We can change, we can learn, right? Like everyone. And,
The
and this,
season in sports, right? This is a new season.
it's a new season. Exactly right. And for me, one of the learnings was when you're running a company that is, 1,000+ people, it is, similar to where you guys are. It's like, it's not just about the tactical things. It's also about strategy, right? And so me, in my case, spending more time on strategy, being more candid with our employees, but in a compassionate way. Things that aren't the candor, it doesn't come naturally to me. And I think one of the things I did a disservice to our team is just not sharing those growth feedback enough. I just gave feedback actually to our head of strategy in her, annual review or whatever, and a couple weeks ago. And I gave her some input. She's great, but I gave her some input, constructive stuff too. And she was like, Nick, this is so amazing. And she's like, I've worked for other managers at Gainsight over 4 or 5 years, and I've never gotten useful feedback before. And now I got it. I was like, oh, I feel bad that you didn't.
Right.
But that shows you that the right people value the constructive feedback.
They do, because it's the only space you can grow, right?
That's exactly right.
I spoke to Maureen Lonergan, who's the head of the ASW Training and Certification Network, one of the largest external education providers.
Wow.
And she shared a story about early in her career as a learning and development professional, you're often kind of off to the side of the business strategy. And that's not the right way of doing it, folks. But for Maureen, when she joined Amazon, they did a killer work of embedding that organizational capability, the business of learning, into their system for how they do their investment planning. And so for the first time, she was asked and given feedback from a business context, and that just helped totally change the trajectory of her and her team. And she credits it because of that killer feedback.
Wow, that's awesome.
Early in her time as she was starting to build that team. So I think if you're not getting the feedback, seek it out, because you can ask too if you don't feel like you're getting it.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I love that, by the way, that's so cool, because I think there are a lot of people who could be more integrated in the business. It's not just even learning, other departments as well, customer success, and they're not. They're kind of an afterthought, and that does the business a disservice. But sometimes they're a little afraid to raise their hand.
One of the practices I've heard that you like to do at Gainsight, tell me if this is true or not, is something called red teaming.
Yeah.
What's red teaming?
Well, red teaming, we definitely didn't invent it. It's been around for a long time. But, I think it's language that you can use to take the opposite point of view.
Okay.
And it's not always that you disagree with what was said, but actually to explore what the other side was. So, basically, as an example,
Can we red team live? Can we do a little red
let's
team
do
right
it.
now?
Let's go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read something for you, and I want you to red team.
Okay, go.
Yeah? Okay. High standards of accountability, giving direction early and often. These are things that you're known for. But tell me how holding leaders to a high standard, giving that direction early and often, does it stifle creativity, stifle risk-taking?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, if you believe that high standards and accountability stifles creativity and risk-taking, I could red team that. And I could say, yeah, that's possible. But then the alternate point of view would be like, no, there's a world where having high standards and accountability makes it really clear to people what's expected for them. And they don't spend all this time worrying about, am I doing the right thing or not? And then that's more mental energy to be creative. So that's like it's a great example, red teaming. And I think the great thing about red teaming is it's not like I disagreed with that statement.
No.
I don't know if I agree or disagree. It's just we explored the other side of it. And yesterday in our exec meeting, this happens all the time. Like somebody said something and somebody said, okay, well, let me try red teaming that.
Yeah.
And here's this other alternative view. And then somebody else said, well, let me try red teaming the red team. And it's great because it doesn't feel like, oh, that person thinks my idea is dumb. It's more like, let me just take the opposite point of view. And by the way, I love that people at Gainsight, very privileged for me, they red team my ideas a lot.
Good.
And that's good because honestly, most of my ideas suck. But also, even if they're good ideas, by red teaming, you get to understand, okay, well, let's say we even go with this main idea. we know what the other side of the discussion is, so we can launch it better, we can explain it better, we can address concerns. So red teaming lets you make actually better decisions and better execution.
It also probably gives space for a bit of disagree and commit.
Disagree 100%. Yeah.
So I got one more for you. A very human first style is something you're known for, with a focus on empathy, transparency. Tell me how this emphasis on empathy could potentially lead to underperformance
Yes.
if not balanced with discipline.
So, I mean, this is the transition for me of like Nick 1.0 to 2.0
Okay.
is, I do like see the best in every person genuinely. And I like always know that there's greatness in them. And I know that whatever challenges they have come from things that have happened in their life before, and you never know their whole story. I believe all those things. Like for me, they're not cliches, they're real. And I know that to run a business, you need to have people excelling or everyone else suffers, you know? And so, and in particular, there's different ways to suffer. If you have an ineffective leader, then the team suffers big time. If you have really effective teammates, but some of their peers aren't, then the teammates are effective, they feel bad. They feel used. They're like, how come I'm working so hard and doing all this great stuff and this other person's kind of coasting? Like, doesn't feel good to them. And so I've had to go through and learn myself that you can be empathetic, you can care about people, and you can actually give hard feedback and make tough decisions, including some cases firing people, right? Because it's actually the right thing for the broader community of people. But it's hard for that person. And I have a lot of empathy for that person. I try to help them, by the way, find their next job, et cetera. But I found before I had empathy, but it led me to not having courage, right? So you can have empathy and you can have courage at the same time. I'm trying to balance those.
But you're unlocking potential for both the company to go where it needs to, but also the person to find a better fit.
You nailed it. I mean, one day, sports is great because yeah, people get cut, they retire, they get traded. One day, maybe 1,000 years from now, LeBron James will retire, and he has like he has for people who know one of the greatest basketball players of all time. But like it's a good example where even he will eventually get to the point where he can't contribute at the level he did. He'll go off and do something great post basketball. But yeah, everyone gets to the point where they're no longer a fit.
Yeah. And one of the things that seems to be a topic in the world, in business, forever, but I think now especially is this like growth at all costs.
Yeah.
Now you've talked about the importance of durable long-term growth. How do you like balance that against the pressures of value now, value today?
Yeah, I think that so there's multiple pieces, but I think the more interesting way to analyze it is if you could grow super fast, honestly, you should probably. What ends up happening though is a lot of companies just throw money after things that aren't even driving growth.
Right.
And so we said growth at all costs, but actually what it was like in some case, just all costs, no growth, right? And so just like spending money, hiring people, buying, getting the free lunches or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And is it really driving growth or value for your customers or your employees? Like, is it real value and growth? And I think what's happened now is people have come back and said, what really matters?
Yeah.
What are the things I should spend money on? Versus in a bubble economy, everyone's like, okay, let me just do everything possible and hire every kind of role in every region and get every like free lunch option, every masseuse and everything, every swag, all the things, right?
Yeah. So what advice do you have for a CEO who may be in that situation and needs to like change culture, shift the way that not only they think, but the employees within their system think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of employee change management that's required nowadays because unfortunately, like employees got a lesson, using a learning term, in the last 15 years that's not real, or at least it was ephemeral, which is, hey, you're going to get promoted every 6 months and you're going to get huge raises and everyone's going to be worth a ton of money and all that, right?
Yeah.
And that's good. You're all going to have your own private island, right? But like, that's just not real. And so that might have been the fantasy land for a few years. It's not real. And so I think the hard thing is helping employees understand this new world and being empathetic, because you know what? If you're an employee in a company, and especially if you're not a very senior exec, it's confusing. It's like all of a sudden we went from hiring everyone and we're getting promoted and now what happened? Like, where did my opportunity go? Like, what's wrong with me? And then also, wait, what's going to happen with generative AI? Is that going to take my job? I have a lot of empathy for the angst that people feel as employees in businesses right now. And by the way, tech is not immune. And so I think helping employees understand that this is actually normal. It doesn't feel great.
No.
But it's normal. So having the honest conversation with employees in an empathetic way, where you're not just saying, hey, suck it up. That's terrible. Instead saying, look, I know this isn't great. Like, I know this is hard. I know things were better before. I also am not going to lie to you. That's one of the things I say over and over again is I respect you too much to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you everything's great or how you're all going to get promoted because it's just not true. Just be honest with you. Here's what I owe this to you, And so the deal. Unfortunately, this is probably true in most companies.
The reality of the world that we're operating in has changed. And so it's not an easy spot to be in. I have a couple more questions for you, if that's okay.
Go for it. I love it.
Okay, so one of the questions I have is from our CEO, Alessio, and he found out that I was talking to you. And so he recorded a question
Oh, wow.
he'd like to ask you.
Okay,
I
great.
play it for you.
You thrive in an environment that is the customer success space. So you're a leader in the space. People look at you as a source of inspiration. And as such, how do you challenge your own employees and your customers as staying up to date with the market trends? How do you challenge your employees to inspiring your own customers every day? And how do you make sure that your customers stay up to date on the newest innovation from Gainsight, but even beyond Gainsight, and they're educated in the industry? Now, I think you do a pretty good job at it, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Alessio. Really appreciate it. So how do we make sure people stay on top of trends? So if I started with our employees, our employees, one of the things I try to do is really encourage that idea of spending time with customers, right? And I think some of that is just sharing what I'm learning. So I send an email every Sunday night to the employees about things I learned in the last week and actually what's happening in my personal life. Every single week. I've done it literally across Gainsight and then past employers for 20 years
Wow.
straight with a couple vacation interruptions. But beyond that, every single time. And I always talk about, what did I learn? So for example, last week we had a big customer event. And what I learned from that, we have this new generative AI based solution and everyone is super into it. And I talked about why and what are the use cases. And so I share what I learned. I actually also most days do a Slack post to the company, what I learned that day. I just call it my daily diary. Like, here's the meetings I had. I'll probably do one today and talk about this great conversation and what did I learn that day? And so that's me sharing. I encourage our employees to then share as well, right? Not necessarily in the public Slack channel, but individually in different channels, in different forums, right? Really encouraging that idea of sharing knowledge, sharing trends, sharing insights. We try to encourage people to really leverage the existing meeting recordings that we have. I think a lot of people probably I'm sure you have meeting recordings as well, and then using those for people to listen to what happened in a customer engagement and sharing those. Sometimes people share snippet, be like, hey, these 5 minutes, people talk about why they hate this feature in Gainsight or whatever. Like
That's so powerful.
not just good things, bad things too, right? Yeah. And then Alessio asked about sharing trends with customers. And that's huge because I think a big part of being a B2B business now is you're not just selling software or some other product. You're actually trying to help people stay on the cutting edge of whatever their field is. And it's all about like helping them innovate in their business, helping them drive success for their customers, right? That's what we're all trying to do. Selling software is part of that. But really, why do they buy from companies now? There's a million software products, right? There's different products in your category and our categories.
Yeah.
The reason they buy is they want to know this company gets it. They get me, meaning the customer, they get it. If I'm partnering with them, I'm going to be going in the right direction. And so what that means is there's lots of ways you can drive that thought leadership, right? I grimace at that term because it sounds so highfalutin, but like, doing events, right? So valuable. And we do this big conference called Pulse for customer success people. We do this smaller event for chief customer officers, and people love hearing where are things going? We do surveys and stats. I'm sure you do things like this, right? And so that's one example. We've written actually amazingly 5 books on various parts of the customer journey. And people love learning, and like we wrote one recently on digital customer success, having a more digital automated type approach, right? People love reading that and learning. We obviously do a lot of LinkedIn posts to share what I'm learning day to day. And so I think it's like taking the learnings, sharing them internally and sharing them externally. And that's where transparency is so huge. Because if you're sharing all the time what's happening, people know that they can trust you, right? I'm not always going to make the right decisions. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. But I think one thing people know is they always know what's on my mind.
And do you find that context is a bit of a superpower at Gainsight?
Yeah, I think transparency people really value. I'm a big believer in just like open it all up as much as
Trust.
possible.
It probably helps with the buying cycle. If you're an interested buyer and you see all that information,
Totally.
available, it's so refreshing.
100%. Customers know they can trust you.
Right. And it's one of those things that I think people forget how important knowledge is as a currency of trust. I want to take it back a bit to one of your personal interests. I have a Pittsburgh question, a Taylor Swift question, and then a prediction question.
Okay, sounds good. Let's
do
go.
First, okay, fine. Here we go. Growing up in Pittsburgh, lifelong Steelers fan, do you draw any leadership lessons from your favorite football team that influences your management style?
Well, I think that there is a lesson about loyalty, and but I do think you're rooting for a tradition. Even companies are like this too. There's a tradition in different teams, and that tradition is a culture, right? Especially if the owner has been stable. It's a culture. A company has a culture and tradition. It just who is like the way we do things here. That's what a culture is, right? This is how we do things in this company. And I think sports teams have that. The Steelers have a specific culture around, stability and sticking with things. And sometimes, by the way, it can be frustrating because you're like, oh, we got to change our coach. But in the long run, it's probably good, And so understanding like what is a company culture and what's the thing that could last 20, 30, 40 years.
It's really cool to listen to your passion for the Steelers and how that like understanding of community has translated into the way that you've built the culture and community at Gainsight. Okay, so talking about Taylor Swift, her line from the song Shake It Off, I'm dancing on my own. Yeah. I make moves up as I go. Can you speak to the role of intuition and trusting your gut?
I love how you're weaving these things in. I think that it's interesting when people say trust your gut a lot. And I think the way I interpret it is going back to what I've said like 100 times in this interview, which is understanding yourself, right? So it's not so much that your gut is going to make a better decision than other people's, in my opinion. It's more that your gut is going to make a decision that's authentic to who you are. And if you make that decision authentic to you, it's a higher likelihood of success. Put another way, I guarantee a decision will fail if you're doing it and it's not who you are. I don't think it'll guarantee to succeed just because it's authentic, but I guarantee it'll fail if it's not authentic, right? And so I think part of trusting your gut is really understanding who you are and then what decision feels authentic to who you are. There's some times when you'll be like, hey, the way Nick would run Gainsight and some other CEO who could be equally good or better than me, it's not gonna be the same. No. Like they're not gonna be this weird Taylor Swift, science, physics, Bruce Springsteen person writing strange things on the side, but also running a company. They're not.
Yeah.
But they'll probably do some other amazing things that hopefully are authentic to who they are.
And that's cool too.
That's great too.
Right. Yeah. That's like the fabric of human nature.
Exactly.
It's all super unique and different. And one of the things, despite how unique all of our guests are in Leaders in Learning, we do ask them this one question at the end of the interview. And it is prediction based. So get your crystal ball out. And I'm going to ask you 3 predictions. One that you're 90% sure about. Second, you're only 50% sure about. And the third is something you're only 10% sure about.
Okay, 90% sure that the entire business world and probably society is going to be totally remade because of generative AI. I'm actually like 100% sure. Like it's going to be like a level of both opportunity and disruption unimaginable and very quickly. And so we have to really understand what's going to happen, take advantage of the positives, prepare people for the challenges right away.
Okay, 50%.
50%. Enterprise software as it is will still be very relevant in the future. Some people think it'll all be replaced by like pure generative AI and like you don't need software companies anymore. I don't think that that's true, although I can't claim to know for sure. I'm sort of biased. I want Docebo and Gainsight to be around, but I'm sort of biased on that one. 10%. Nuclear fusion will be a reality by 2040 and will give the world limitless energy and be the solution to climate change. I do think that these innovations in general are going to be unimaginable. And I do believe the future is bright. We're set to be ready for it.
We just got to be ready for it. Well, thank you so much, Nick. This has been a fantastic time chatting with you. I'm so glad to be able to meet you and learn a bit more about why you're the godfather of customer success.
Oh, it's so nice to meet you. It was an awesome conversation. Look forward to chatting again.
Yeah, take care. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.